Let's see. Okay, cool. We're recording. I just wanted to make sure. All right, so I'm gonna close my door here because otherwise my dog will be in here making noises. Probably still make some noises. Just suspect it. So I know a lot of people have seen my videos on um, the OP1, not OP1, the OPXY. And if you're new to teenage engineering or the step sequencing workflow type deal, and I say that meaning like Elektron or the OPZ or things of that nature, where they do a lot with step components, then you won't appreciate, in my opinion, you won't appreciate the OPXY. And here's why. The OPXY is like a combo of the OPZ, the Elektron type workflow, and the OP1 field, and the KO133. So, of course, it has the 8 tracks that you can use. And when I say 8 tracks, I'm talking about 8 tracks for instruments or MIDI, right? The other tracks are primarily for like tape effects and different types of effects. Let's just leave it at that. But it's an 8 track sequencer. It's basically what it is. And I'm, again, instrument wise, it's an 8 track sequencer. So, one way to test if you really like that workflow is to use Drambo on the iOS. Now, this works on the iPhone and on the iPad. So, I highly suggest trying this out. I did, and I learned it through Echo Opera, who helped me kind of guide me and navigate through this because I'd never used step sequencer workflows. Now, don't think when I say step sequencer, meaning everything you have to do is punched in, because you can literally play into the OPXY, you can play into Drambo, you can play into the Elektron boxes. It's not all having to be step sequenced in. However, to get the most out of the device, you will need to use and learn a step sequencer. That's just part of it. Now, the um, the Drambo has more to give than the Elektron boxes. Drambo has more to give even than the OPXY. And why do I say that? Because while, let me get my mouse so you can see here. So while it does have 8 tracks on a general start, and these ABs are your return, or you could say your effects tracks. If you look here, there's more tracks here that are not, don't have anything. The master track is just your master chain, and the main channel is where all your, it shows your different tracks, right? And you have your access to your control panel, so to speak, where you can pan stuff and change it. But you can add with this plus symbol here more tracks to your device and increase it. And depending on what year or what specs your iPad has, you can probably run more tracks than 8 for sure. Most of us can if you're on any of the newer, especially the M1 iPads, but the iPad mini or any of those should be able to run it pretty fluidly. And I even can do it on my iPhone. So, I mean, you can definitely do it. Now, when I'm in Drambo, I don't use, generally speaking, more than 8 tracks. So for me, 8 tracks is plenty. But I'm not doing no vocals. It's not designed, in my opinion, to do all those type of things, right? And when you get hardware is going to have limitations, right? It's based on what internally or how it's built internally. And when they design it, they know there's certain limitations. Like, so even if you go get an MPC, I think the MPC has 128 MIDI tracks and only 8 audio. And it's been like that for a minute. I think since the MPC Live came out. So you can't really you can't get in and be like, well, I want more audio tracks. I actually did that, but it's not going to work because they know they built it with a certain capacity, right, that it could take before the machine just starts acting funny and crashing and giving you a whole bunch of problems. So anyway, that said, this is Drambo. This is the workflow. These are your tracks. This is the main one where you can see your mutes, your solos. You can go through and kind of fine tune your mixing. And then each track has a MIDI to CV on it when you start out, right? And then you can add generators. Generators, you can think of that as the instrument, okay? It's an instrument, basically, is what it is. That's just a term they use for it. Processor is basically what it is. It's just effects, right? It's like you can see here, filters right here. Now these are the ones built into here. Amps like ADSRs, shaper type distortion stuff where you can reduce the bit rates, and then other effects like repeat, stopper. You can see here the wave tables, etc. Okay, you can also bring in your AUV3s. My daughter's in the background making a lot of noise, so I'm wondering like, okay, so you can bring in other AUV3s and other racks and things of that nature. There's modulators, mixers. Here's some MIDI tools, some miscellaneous stuff that you might use, and these different type of punch in. I think these are like effects and things that you can add to create instrument racks. So there's a bit of the Ableton workflow in here with the creating your racks, your instruments. And then there is also the Drambo, and not Drambo, Elektron, and then the OPZ type workflow that all exists within these step sequencers. And I'm showing you this, 1 second. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. I'm just telling my daughter if she can move away from the door so we can. All right, finish this video. So this is the type of workflow you're in. So I'm not going to go into grave detail, but if you look down here and you saw I press that little drop down, these are your different scenes that you can create. If you've ever used Ableton, you got scenes and then you got clips. And my daughter is still making a bunch of noise. So 1 second while I ask her not to. Okay. Going back. So you have your scenes and you create different ones. So this is very similar to the OPXY, if that's what you're looking at, right? It's going to be clip bass. And if you don't like clip bass, which I was against clip bass for a while, but I'm starting to see there is some validity to it. There's some good reasons, I should say, to use it. It's very valuable in its own way to get stuff done quick and to create and generate ideas. That's what I see in it personally. Now, of course, you may be into this, and if you're watching this video and you are, feel free to express your feelings of why you like the clip-based workflow and step sequencing in the comments below. You can expand this screen out more, and you can set these up on timers. And it's the same thing in the song mode on the OPXY. You can have a song mode with all these different scenes going on. And I think you get 99 scenes, if I'm not mistaken. And you have 9 different clips per track, right? So very similar. So here's your scenes going on. A scene makes up however many tracks you have in this case. And each one of these would be a clip right here. Each one of these little squares that you add in, okay? So that's pretty simple to understand. I think This is your 16 bar step sequencer, the same you would have on an Elektron, the same you would have on the OPXY. Obviously, this is in 4/4. So if you thought like 4 to the floor, you would see somebody do this, right? And it would just be like a kick. I'm gonna just give you an example. Be a kick, just pumping out like that. Now within here, if you look down here, this is you can switch it to a keyboard, or you can have these pads, and you can press two things at once, and then when you click, it plays both. So if you want to see that, what that looks like, it looks like this on a MIDI, or on the hamburger thing right here. So on the MIDI, you can see the note. We'll get to all this good stuff in a minute. Let me get back to this. So this is the sequence, but in here, you can slide to the right and you can adjust how many bars you want, up to 16, which is the same thing that the OPXY can do. It can do up to 16. Now it says 4, but because it can be scaled, you could, well, actually, technically, I take that back. Because it can be scaled, you can have 64. So this is 16, but the way this one does the scaling is this little button here, and you adjust the speed, or here, you can adjust the steps of the bar to scale it. So it's the same thing as scaling, right? You scale it by adjusting, adding to the length. You can add to the bars this way, subtract the bars this way. The quicker way is to slide, or double, or divide them, or add steps. But if you want to scale it, then you can scale it by half. And if you scale it by half, then 16 becomes 32, right? And then if you go to the next one, 16 becomes, I can't remember the number, but you see what I'm saying? So it's like 32 bars, and then they have scales all the way up to a 64th. So it's a little bit more than what's in the OPXY. And I can't say I've had the opportunity to use an Elektron box. Well, I've touched one before, but I've never actually. I did buy the Digitac when it first came out, but it was so deep to my brain couldn't grasp it. And there wasn't enough videos on it at the time, so I didn't really stick with it. But anyway, I did try one some time ago when they first came out. All right, let's clear this out. So this is the workflow that you are going to be dealing with, minus this A-B slider, disregard that for right now, that you're going to be dealing with. Now, in Drambo, you can go in and adjust the MIDI notes. So if you have this piano roll here, you could drag it out and do MIDI notes. But a lot of people that use Drambo are using it primarily for the step sequencer, which you can drag out stuff like that, right? You can press another note and drag it out. Now you can do this in Elektron boxes, as far as I know, and you can definitely do it on the OPXY. You have to learn their method, but it's very similar. For instance, in the OPXY, you click here, and then you hold it, and then you touch the other end, and it will extend it out. Or you could just play it in, but I'm just showing you the step sequencer part. So what I do in it is I like to play the majority of my stuff. Occasionally, what I'll do is when I'm experimenting or making something that's like very textural or random, then I'll use the step sequencer more. Or let's say I'm doing like my snares, right? So I'll take the snare, put it on here and on here, and then I'll just start doing the drums, right? Start putting the kicks. And I used to do this in the SP404 with its little sequencer. I say little because it really wasn't great. It was simple to use, but nothing spectacular. There was no step components. So since I said step components and all that stuff, let's talk about them a little bit. Now, I'm not the most savvy at this. I just learned this stuff not too long ago. But since I do kind of know it, I'll give you an example what you could do. So you'll see up here these groupings: velocity, gate, offset, probability, retrigger, cycle, and comp. Some of them I've used and some of them I haven't. But the velocity is pretty simple. You guys understand velocity, up and down, how hard you want the note to hit. So that's pretty simple to adjust. The gate I never use. I'm going to talk about the offset. So offset is like nudging a note. So you could nudge it. Obviously down here will be perfectly on. I didn't mean to do that, but you could nudge the note, offset it a little bit there. Probability is going to be how often it plays. So this is kind of like what your triggers, where you're setting a certain amount of times that you want it to hit, or the percentage, I should say, you want it to play this note or not play the note. Retrigger is kind of good to use with probability. So if it's just right here where it's at, it's going to just play every time. But you can set it. Let me do this with my hand. Like, I only wanted to play for 3 times, or I only wanted to play 2 times, but I want this one to play 4 times or 3 times. See what I'm saying? Whatever you want. If you want it to play every time, then you would leave it there. So how many times is it going to re-trigger? The cycle is kind of working in that capacity. So how many cycles is it going to go through before it re-triggers? So you could say, all right, I want to do that one. So you slide it up, right? I want it to go there, but I don't want it to trigger until the 4th time that it plays around. Or this one, I want it to trigger on that. Or I want it to trigger 2 times. And then maybe you throw, but I want it to go trigger 2 times within the 4 times that it cycles through. That's the kind of stuff it is with step sequencing like this. Because otherwise, if you did this and you, let's say you didn't, trying to get rid of this. Okay. If you were just doing really basic step sequencing, like what you do in my opinion, in Fruity Loops, where you're just punching in some spots you want stuff to hit and that's it, then you might as well just not get a step sequencer. Or just use Fruity Loops, or use any really DAW, because technically you could go in a DAW. I mean, MPC has some step sequencing too, but it's not on Elektron level or even OPZ or OPXY level, because it doesn't have the components if it does, and I've used it once, but I don't recall those components being there. And if it has any, it's probably really basic. So anyway, but you got to figure out if that's what you want. All right, so inside here, of course, you have the ability to stretch. Like I said before, you can set this to free, where if you want to stretch it shorter distances or longer distance or slightly this way, wherever you want it, you can set that, right? So that's up to you. Of course, the velocity, you can edit the velocity, which is here, up and down. So this, if you've ever used any piano roll, this is basically a piano roll. So this is a different way to adjust things, even though you're using a step sequencer. And I would say this way is really good for that, just your velocity and the note length. This way is better for all the probability and things of that nature. Cycle, retrigger, probability, velocity, even if you want to do that. And then this way is like a bigger version of the grid that you'd have down here, but now you have all of it right here in your presence. So if your tracks are named, which you can double click and rename. So let's say, just as an example, this is your kick. So if this is your kick, there you go. You know what your kick is. You could start programming in your kick. I would not put the kick there. let's say put the kick. We just do a 4 to the floor just so you can see it. But yeah, there you go. Or you can play it in. So in here, the way you would play it in is you'd hit record, then play it. It'll give you a count in. And now you have it auto extends. I forgot the name for that, but it keeps going for you just like an Ableton would do on a clip, right? So that you can play in your stuff as long as you want to, as long as you, I think it's 16 right bars, so up to 16 bars per track. So that's it, and that's how you delete real quick. And we'll close that off. So is it for you? Well, that's something only you can answer. I would say Drambo is much cheaper to try than going out, obviously, and buying a piece of hardware. I think the Elektron boxes are interesting. They are very detail oriented and kind of a lot to learn. So I wouldn't say if you're new to step sequencing type stuff to go try that because it's expensive, and you and the OPXY same thing. It's expensive, and if you never tried a step sequencer and don't understand the components and all that type of stuff, you're gonna get more confused and frustrated, and you're not gonna keep the device. You're gonna send it back. Plus, there's a bit of patience when you buy hardware, well, software too, but particularly hardware, because you're waiting on that team, whoever developed it, to fix any problems. And a lot of stuff they can fix pretty quickly, but some of the issues are things that they have to develop or program, and it might take them a little bit longer to make that. And I'm trying to say this stuff in very layman's term, very simple terms for anybody that might watch this. Don't expect a lot of quick changes with hardware. It just takes time. They have to develop it and then make it smooth and make sure it's tested, and it's a lot more. Now, software is the same, but I think with software, there's a lot more, it's less they have to deal with. They're dealing with the, whatever the computers can manage. And most of the time, computers can manage way more than what is the hardware is able to compute, right? Because they're building on smaller limitations generally. So because the internals are generally limited, then that's what you're gonna get. So what's cool is the iPad is a great source for trying out a lot of different things that you might be interested in, workflows that is. I believe FL Mobile is on here, but I've never used, I think I tried it once, but it wasn't for me. I didn't like the workflow. But anyway, try Drambo out. I would highly suggest it if you want to try that workflow. I have a couple videos where I show some different tracks I've made in it, and I even kind of break down what I'm doing in some of them. And if you check out my first album that I dropped, which was Two Sides to Every Story, there's about there's 5 tracks in that album that were made in Drambo. And in Drambo, what I find to be more interesting is using it to live record out. So in other words, on the master channel, you see this right here, you can press this button, and then once you start playing, see it's set to record, it's going to record out whatever you play. If you want all the individual tracks, I think if you go to the main, no, the main does the master. Hold on. I think you can arm, it's been a while since I tried this. Hold on. I know there's a way to arm all of them, but anyway, you can, that arms and controls the master of everything. But I feel like, if I remember right, each channel has its own ability to record out. It will stem out, I know that. Unlike the OPXY at this very moment of this recording, they have not added any way to stem out. So you pretty much are taking it one channel at a time out, right? Sending it out. I think with the Elektron boxes, you have to have, is it Overbridge? I think it's Overbridge, which is a software they made to help you stem out the tracks. So with hardware, you got a little more work to do. It's just what it is, and people that get it, they kind of, for the most part, have accepted that the work. That's what they're taking on when they use it, and they like it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I had a guy yesterday. He was like, "Well, I just use Fruity Loops," and you're okay. That's fine. Use Fruity Loops. Don't buy something that you don't feel you really are going to use. Because if you're not going to use it, you're probably just not going to use it. And that's okay. It doesn't mean other people shouldn't, though, because they may enjoy that. Everybody's different. And that's what's beautiful about music. We don't all need to use the same thing to create music. All right. And everybody's doing different styles. Some people prefer step sequencers only. Some people prefer a combination, like me. I prefer a combination of everything. Um, and some people, they're only going to play in a DAW, and that's just what they want to do. I've done that for many years too, so I get it. And some people are just about sampling. They don't want to play. They don't want to play instruments. They want to just sample, and that's okay too. Again, take it. That is up to the individual. I don't believe that you should knock anybody for finding a workflow that works for them, as long as they get what they want out of it, which is happiness and making music, and they make music, then that's what it is. And each person's term of what music is going to vary because people like different styles. I know I prefer like jazz, and then I like other styles when it's blended with a measure of jazz. But some people like EDM, and some people like IDM, and some people like hip hop, and some people like, so it just depends on the person. But again, be respectful to each person and their workflows they like. Um, Learn from other people because it's going to only help you grow as a musician. Whether you use the device or not, you can learn techniques and things from people, um, and have fun. That's the most important thing. All right, guys. Well, I enjoyed this one and wanted to show you this and hope you have a great day. And I'm out.